I wouldn't be surprised if Dragon is considered the world's worst criminal by the world government solely because of what he did at God Valley. The rhetoric that's being put on him probably has nothing to do with leading the Revolutionary Army. His actions at God Valley were just that blasphemous. So there's a very good chance of that, because I was recently reminded of something that Kuma said in his flashback. There's one page of the incident at the human auction house that we see from Kuma's perspective, and it turns out that he saw Luffy punch a St. Charles, and Kuma said to himself, "Look, Straw Hat, that's an act of high treason, the likes of which none have accomplished in many centuries." Which is simply not true, because we saw Dragon commit a similar act in this chapter, but of course Kuma likely doesn't know that. Dragon says so little about himself that I doubt Kuma even knew that Dragon was on God Valley. But an assault against a world noble is apparently a crime that hasn't been committed in centuries, and so it would be a pretty massive deal and could easily give Dragon the status of world's worst criminal before he even has the power to back that up. And from the perspective of the world nobles, how could you get worse than what it is Dragon did? Attacking a god is blasphemy of the highest order. And I do love this idea because it goes hand in fist with Garp. After God Valley, he became known as the world's greatest hero, and his son may have become known as the world's greatest villain. Free the slaves? Not on my watch. Garp, probably. I am seeing a lot of discourse around Garp due to this chapter, and I think the funniest comment that I've seen is, "Bogard, I can hear the drums of oppression." So Garp springs into action as some sort of reverse sun god, the warrior god of oppression. In Garp's defense, the reason why he's even on God Valley at all has nothing to do with the world nobles. He couldn't care less about them, and he was more than happy to leave them to their fate while he was on his relaxing vacation, until it is that he heard that Roger was going to be on the island. So Garp is here to get his man, not to protect these men. And we have been told by Sengoku that Garp and Roger teamed up to defend the world nobles, but again, we were told that by Sengoku, who quite frankly has already lied to us about Rox Dizabek and the God Valley incident. So until I see it happen, I don't know how much I can trust those words anymore. And Garp could have placed himself in a Fujitora-esque scenario where he acted like he was fighting on behalf of the world nobles, but was also very sneakily trying to allow as many slaves to be freed as possible. But even so, Garp and the Marines do have a lot to answer for. Garp especially, he knew what was happening here, and it's hard not to come to the conclusion that Garp has deemed activities like the native hunting contest as an acceptable cost for maintaining the balance of the world and ensuring the peace of hundreds of other nations and millions, maybe tens, hundreds of millions of other people. I don't believe that it's Oda's intention to make Garp out to be a bad guy, and I also think that he and Dragon exist to serve as opposing solutions to the same problem. Garp has chosen to work within the system, to do his best to affect change from the inside, which is slow and unsatisfying, but what Garp is doing is inspiring and molding the minds of the next generation of the Marines to eventually be capable of enacting the justice it is they're supposed to stand for, and also maintaining global stability at the same time with all of the suffering that brings. Meanwhile, Dragon has chosen to rebel against the system, to try and take a much more quick path towards revolution, which will also cause his own suffering as global stability collapses, which we are beginning to see with the cult of the Flame Emperor Sabo rising, as well as in this very chapter with Dragon's platoon, which we will talk about. And in the end, I don't think that either Garp or Dragon are going to be positioned as flat out right or wrong, mostly because this is a story about Luffy. It's going to be Luffy who provides the key to a happy ending here, the third generation of monkeys choosing a third path forward and providing an inspirational conclusion that would probably never work in real life, but hey, that's why this is fictional pirates. But one more thing I did want to add about Dragon, and I guess the Revolutionary Army, and I can't believe I haven't clocked this until now, but the three founding members of the Revolutionary Army were all on God Valley. Dragon, Kuma, and Ivankov. And yes, Dragon had the freedom fighters initially before Kuma joined, but after Kuma joined, these were the three that became the pillars of the Revolutionary Army. So that is a pretty colossal seed that was planted on God Valley by the world government itself. I love listening to music or podcasts when I'm doing pretty much anything: writing, editing, walking, running, cleaning, all of the things. However, my ears, they're stupid, they're quite sensitive, and constant direct exposure to sound can make things feel quite painful, which is why I have been using these bad boys for the past couple of weeks. These are the Raycon Essential Open Earbuds, the sponsor of this video, which deliver crystal clear sound while sitting comfortably outside of your ear canal with a snug and secure flexible ear hook to ensure a personalized fit and to stop one of my biggest problems, which is earbuds falling out of my ears if I slightly move my head. And they're also shockingly lightweight to really complete that sensation, or should I say lack of sensation, of having something in your ears. And they also keep me connected to the world around me. Due to the open nature, I can still hear all of the important things like my wife asking a question or traffic. Traffic's pretty important. And I've got to be honest, I was quite skeptical about the open earbud system at first, but after using them for a couple of weeks, mate, I am finding it so difficult to go back to my previous earbud regime. And there's no need to, because Raycon's offering features 36 hours of battery life, connectivity to multiple devices at once, superior comfort, and quality that rivals the big premium brands at half the price. So you can and should click the link in the description or go to buyraycon.com/groundlineopen to get 20% off. 20%! It is such a big number. That's 20% off when you go to buyraycon.com/groundlineopen. So definitely check them out. I've been quite impressed with them. But for now, it's back to you, me. Internet man, did you miss when Dragon said his whole platoon got executed? Yeah, so I did not mention that in the review video because I'm pretty confident that this is a massive translation error and it's real sloppy work. This is a key example of one of the reasons why I always encourage people to read the official translation, because the fan translations have errors everywhere. It's just that no one talks about them because it's only fun to point out the mistakes when the official translation makes them. But Dragon here in the English fan translation is saying that his entire platoon got executed past tense, but what Dragon's saying here is more accurate in the French translation, which is toute mon unité sera décimée. And that word there, sera, that's future tense. It means will be décimée. So what Dragon is actually saying is that if he tries to oppose the world nobles to save these civilians, then his whole platoon will be executed as a result of those actions that he hasn't done yet, which Japanese speakers also seem to agree with. And just to really emphasize how stupid this is, immediately after Dragon says these words, we cut to a shot of his platoon alive and well, asking themselves, where's Dragon? Which would be a really odd decision by Oda to show them alive if they had already been killed. So quite frankly, this is just garbage translating. And look, I know some of you don't like it when I use French on this channel, but to that I say, well, you need to demand better English, because I can't read Japanese very well, and in situations like this, all I've got is French to prevent misinformation. On this topic though, this also adds to what I was saying about Garp and Dragon choosing different paths, because Oda is showing that what Dragon is doing here is not going to be consequence-free. People are going to die because of the decision that he is making on God Valley, and that thought is making Dragon physically ill, but it is a cost that Dragon goes on to accept in order to pursue his own sense of justice, just like Garp does. If Bogard does anything, then this will be the greatest flashback of all time. I disagree. I think if Bogard does anything, then it makes the already greatest flashback of all time that much better. And Radish Doctor in the comments pointed out that Bogard is like that episode of The Simpsons where the Mafia are fighting and Homer's waiting for the little guy to do something. And as soon as you take your eyes off him, that's when he does something amazing off screen. That's Bogard, Garp's right-hand man. He has the authority, he has the confidence, he has a cool hat, and he has the power to act. But thus far in this series, all Bogard has done is aura farm. And I'm very much here for it. I'm a big fan of not needing to answer every question an author asks, and sometimes there is something nicer about lingering mysteries left to the imagination to sculpt an answer, which is why I don't mind off-screening stuff like Kuzan versus Sakazuki, because I'm not sure that Oda could do a fight that legendary more justice than how we collectively imagine it to be. So I would be happy for Bogard to remain a mystery, but I'm equally as happy for him to show us how he earns his money. It might turn out the reason Blackbeard doesn't sleep is not that he can't, but whenever he sleeps, he is tormented by nightmares reliving these days and chooses to stay awake. It really could be as simple and as tragic as that. And reading this chapter does give us a lot more insight into that image that Oda drew of Blackbeard as a child crying under the crescent moon, especially if the will of D does have something to do with the moon, like the popular theory that the D, it's not actually a letter, but instead it is a half moon symbol. Imagine that, every night out pops the D, and in pop a flood of memories of your slaughtered clansfolk, including your loving Nico Robin-shaped mother and your very U-shaped father. This flashback is definitely going out of its way to create a lot of sympathy for Mr. Marshall D. Teach, and look, I do feel it. This child does not deserve anything that is happening to him right now, but it makes me all the more curious to see how Blackbeard evolves into the adult monster that he is today. Because knowing that Blackbeard himself was briefly a slave makes it all the more shocking that he would now own his own slaves on Hachinosu, which were subsequently freed by Kobe and the Sword Marines, but he owned them nonetheless. So I'm wondering if there's a currently unknown figure that slides into Blackbeard's life after this, because I find it so hard to imagine that he becomes what he does solely through the memory of his parents, who both seem to be pretty alright people. But perhaps it could be a Streisand-like figure who corrupted Charlotte Linlin, or a different kind of sinister mentor that warped Blackbeard's understanding of the world and turned him into the monster that he himself was terrorized by as an infant. Mr. Internet Man, did Oda just make Douglas Bullitt a canon character, or am I not seeing well? I actually think it's neither of those. I didn't pick up on this on my first read-through, but when you look at the group shot of the Roger Pirates right behind that there Roger, there is a guy who admittedly looks a hell of a lot like Douglas Bullitt, who served as the primary antagonist of One Piece Stampede, and in that movie he was said to be a former member of the Roger Pirates, which is something that's not made a lot of sense in retrospect, remembering that this film came out before the Oden flashback. In fact, it was very early in the Wano era, so we still knew very little about the Roger Pirates themselves. And it would be a fun Easter egg to mix in these movie characters, but there is one little issue with this potentially being Douglas Bullitt, which is that Bullitt would have been only 7 years old at the time of God Valley. And mate, that is a stacked 7-year-old. And look, that may or may not matter. Stampede isn't canon, so if Oda did want to work Douglas Bullitt in for whatever reason, he could just redo the ages. The question would be though, if this is not Bullitt, and I don't think it is, then who is it? And I put that question to one of my channel artist, Tenguki Arts, because I very recently got him to draw all of the Roger Pirates, and he reckons that this character is actually Rangram, which I think I agree with because they have the same hair, the same face, and they're both carrying what appears to be a spear. So unfortunately, I don't think it's Bullitt. Can we all agree that Saint Figaland Garling is the single most hateable character in One Piece, period? He is the single most hated character so far, as Oda quite consistently amazes me with just how he's able to top what I think is the most detestable character I've ever seen with someone so much worse. Although Garling probably comes with a fair bit of recency bias because we have just seen him murder Shanks's mother. That's not very nice. But if I really think about it, Garling would probably still struggle to top the crimes of one St. J. Garcia Saturn if we were to go back on his CV during Kuma's flashback. But the more we explore the world nobles, the more characters like Spandam and Orochi look like comic relief in comparison. And the more that a traditionally hated magmaman like Sakazuki looks rather good and just in comparison. Yes, he has a philosophy of justice that could be argued to be simply evil, but at least he has a vision and genuinely believes that he is using his evil to do something for the betterment of the world, which is a big difference from what we see with Garling, Saturn, and even Summers. In fact, especially Summers. You know what? I disagree with the entire premise of this. I don't think that Garling is the most hateable character even in this chapter, because Saint Summers, he was so much worse kicking that child out of the tree. There's definitely something going on with the Manmeyer family. The lower half of Gunko's face is hidden, and this past member we see at God Valley has the whole top half of her face hidden. Yes, I will tell you what's going on with the Manmeyer family. It is shame. Great shame. They are ashamed to show their full faces. You know how every sports league has that one team that just sucks? Like, they get out there, they put in an effort, but they always lose. That is the Manmeyer family within the World Nobles. And in chapter 1159, there's even this fun part where the Manmeyer girl says to Gunko, "With you here, we might win a trophy," implying that without Gunko, they're just awful at this stuff. And notice how how she doesn't say we could win the native hunting contest, we could win the grand prize, we could win one of the devil fruits. None of that. This man-made girl would be happy with just a trophy. Doesn't matter what the trophy's for. We just want to win something. We're desperate. And so, as they say in a native hunting contest, never bet on the Manmare family. I've never been bummed out to see Roger and Garp until this chapter. So I know this is probably not meant like this, but this comment does sound like it was made by a world noble. This chapter, mate, it was great until Roger and Garp showed up to ruin my native hunting fun. But also, world noble or not, thank you so much for the $5 super thanks. Genuinely appreciate it. Internet man, is this potentially a situation where the event is renamed as the D-Purge that Clover mentions? It's a very good thing you bring that up, because it may very well be the start of this purge, although I wouldn't put it past One Piece to have multiple purges or purgi. In chapter 1120, we had a brief flashback of Vegapunk and Professor Clover, which took place 26 years ago, so 12 years after God Valley, and here Clover recounts the tale of how his older brother was murdered for revealing that he had a hidden D in his name, and that Clover only survived because he lied about his own D. We have no idea when this murder took place. It could have been around the same time as God Valley, could have been before, could have been after. Those are all the options. And there is an argument to be made that there could be a connection because both Ohara and God Valley were in West Blue, so Clover and his older brother could easily have been caught up in this as locals. They're not members of the Davy clan though. Seems like the Davy clan settled on God Valley and the Clow clan settled on Ohara. However, after finding the Davy clan on God Valley, that could have sparked a renewed effort to hunt down members of the D clan, because finding such a large group of them meant that there could also be large groups propagating on other islands as well. I think that it might not be Rox's wife, but Rox's sister. ¿Por qué no los dos? But in all seriousness, and in English, that could be it. We, and by we I guess I mostly mean me, have been assuming that this is Rox's wife and Blackbeard's mother, and that's because Rox mentioned having a wife and a child, but he did not mention having a sister. However, if Rox's wife wasn't a D, then she could have been turned into a regular rabbit or even disposed of by now, leaving Teach to be taken care of by his aunt. That could be the case. And I guess until we see Teach yell for his mother or aunt as she is inevitably slaughtered in front of his innocent eyes, we won't know for sure. What is the genocide count of this goofy little pirate comic? Amazing question. Let's all count together, shall we? God Valley, Ohara, Flavonce, Lucia, the Lunarians, the Buccaneers, the Kurozumi clan on Wano. And I don't know if the killing of all the pregnant women in South Blue to stop Ace being born technically counts. If so, 8, if not 7. And you know what? I'm probably forgetting some as well. So the answer is lots. It is lots. Gunko now no longer has clean hands, as she is shown causing on-screen deaths. That might be a mark against the turncoat theories. That is true. One of my arguments in favor of Gunko flipping was that she hadn't crossed that moral line. I mean, yeah, she was leading children to their deaths, but they haven't died yet, so the boundary, it remains intact. After this chapter, though, we have seen Gunko murder 3 people, and it's implied that she killed a lot more that we didn't see, but what may save Gunko here is the fact that she has almost certainly had her memories wiped, and we began to see those memories return by recognizing Brook. And she could be used as a character to explore this Shanks and Shamrock dynamic, the difference of being raised by a loving family versus being raised by whatever monsters the world nobles are, except that difference is being explored within a single person. Initially, Gunko grows up with fantastic parents and is shaping up to be a wonderful young lady, but then she gets abducted, her memory wiped, and becomes a blank slate to be indoctrinated by the world nobles. It's the Bucky Barnes defense. Yes, I killed Iron Man's parents, but I wasn't me at the time, I was someone else. Or alternatively, the Severance defense, where Gunko is now 2 people, 3 when Imu joins the party and it gets a little bit too crowded, but ultimately I think it's going to be very hard to blame the Gunko that Brook knew for the crimes of the Gunko that we know, because they're different people. And this is also what we explored with Kuma, the hypothesis that a person is the sum of their memories and experiences. And with Kuma's shell, part of him did remain in there to save Bonnie, in the same way that part of Gunko is still in there to recognize Brook. So I do think that Gunko is still on our very standard One Piece path to attractive female redemption, but it's going to be more of a struggle than anyone who came before her, as I highly doubt that Imu is going to willingly part with a person that he's labeled as the Sword of God.